Did you know that the California state constitution guarantees you the right to fish? It guarantees you access to all state-owned lands and any land sold after 1910 by the state to a private party. I didn't even know that. So if this land that I'm sitting on here was sold after 1910, that means anybody can come here and fish. This is Cow Creek and there's a million smallmouth in there, so come get them. They're eating all the salmon and steelhead. But the state does guarantee you the right to access. Now, where does this come from? Okay, well, it's Article 1, Section 25 of the state constitution, which was done in 1910. And it's interesting, in 1910, okay, well, when was it? This is the age of populism. This was right after the robber barons of the late 19th century, you know, Carnegie and Vanderbilt and, you know, J.P. Morgan and all those guys. And people were kind of fed up with the, you know, the power of control and all the money being, you know, sucked up by a few people. So the age of populism was going on. And as part of that, people wanted to maintain what they felt made America different and better than, say, the old world. So in the old world, going back, you know, even in current times, but, you know, just going way back in Europe and so forth, what we call the old world, the public access was non-existent. The king owned everything. And if you got caught poaching the king's fish, I mean, they could castrate you and or just execute you. It was a really big deal. So the idea of just the public being able to go fishing was really important, and still is important. But to the people back in 1910, you can imagine it was just a little bit different because they're not that far removed from their ancestors coming over from the old world and knowing what that's like. And also the westward expansion, the whole idea of, you know, entering the wilderness and having all these natural resources and all these beautiful rivers and everything, and they just did not want to lose access to that like their ancestors had done over in the old world. So in California anyway, they established this very strong guarantee to access to public lands. So it doesn't mean that the state couldn't regulate. Of course, there's still limits and, you know, seasons and licenses and all that. There's still rules to follow. But the state cannot prevent you from accessing any public land or any land that was sold by the state after 1910, just according to the Constitution. So where does this, you know, come from as far as, you know, in a legal sense? Okay, well, there's the idea of the public trust doctrine. Okay, and the public trust doctrine goes way back, way before the U.S. was established. And it's just a simple idea that the state holds the land in trust for the people. And, you know, and it's just kind of the way we naturally think about things. But the problem with the public trust doctrine is that it's not really written down anywhere. It's not like an amendment in a constitution. It's just an idea, and sometimes ideas can be manipulated by the courts, and, you know, it's kind of a nuance is the term that's used a lot. So back in 1910, they really wanted to, you know, take it a step farther from just the public trust doctrine and establish the public use right. And that's what Article 1, Section 25 establishes, is the public use right. So just because the state, according to the Constitution, you know, gives us the right, that doesn't mean they always actually give us the access, right? There's lots of barriers and just the inability to know exactly where you can go fishing and not. Well, like, for example, with the land that was sold after 1910, it's not like there's a map available. You know, the state could create a map. They have the data, but they're just not going to do that. And because in the state's point of view, it's kind of a pain to have people coming onto the land all the time, and you know, it's something to deal with. So the state can be, you know, hesitant to, you know, encourage people to access the public land and go fishing or go hunting or whatever. It's not just about fishing. So just because it's guaranteed in the Constitution doesn't mean we always take advantage of that right, or that right is always presented to us in a way that we can actually use it. For example, about a month ago, someone messaged me saying that the gates at to the Merced River that went through a water district or irrigation district, the gates were locked. And this is a place where this guy had been fishing for years, and he was just asking me if I knew anything about that. And well, no, I don't know anything about that. The Merced River's down the southern Sacramento Valley. It's a river that flows out of Yosemite, if you're not aware. But so I looked into it a little bit and tried to find, what was going on with that. And I did see in previous years where the sheriff had closed the Merced River down there because of problems. And that kind of makes sense. And at that time, the upper river, up towards Yosemite was closed because it was so low, just for rafting. They didn't want people rafting at that time. Like, okay, public safety, okay. But I called the Merced Water District and also emailed them and messaged them on their Facebook page and got no response whatsoever. So I don't know what the point of the gates being locked there. But the point is, just because legally we have the right, if we don't pay attention to what's going on, that right can be taken away from us and we don't know any different. So I didn't get any information on why the gates were locked on the Merced irrigation district there. And okay, I dropped the ball though. I didn't follow through. That was right before I was going on a trip to Canada. I'm busy just like everybody else. And that's kind of what maybe the state or, people behind, closing gates or doing whatever, maybe that's kind of what they count on, is the fishermen aren't always real active in, defending their rights. We'd like to talk about things among ourselves, but actually following through to really get to what's going on and to defending our constitutional rights, maybe we're not so good at that. There's an example, talk about a water district, of an attorney a few years ago who was a big fisherman, and then he found a lock gate like that. Well, he cut the locks. And some of the employees there at the water district, I don't know which water district this was, but they put him under citizen's arrest. So they arrested this, held him and called the sheriff, I guess. And so this is an attorney who, knows what's going on, and the prosecutor looked at the situation and, of course, probably understood what the Constitution says and didn't want to touch it. It didn't go anywhere. It was just dropped right away. So all that person had to do was, stand up for his rights. And we need to do that a little bit more if we see situations like that. Now, don't go cut locks and tell them that I said it was okay. So just because our right to fish is guaranteed in the state constitution, that doesn't mean that the state is going to guarantee our right to fish. We have to pay attention to that ourselves and police that ourselves. So if the governor does something, the state legislature, water district, any state-owned, anything that's managed by the state, if they're doing something that you think is illegally restricting our right to fish, then you're perfectly welcome to speak up, and you're not wrong for doing that. And that might be all it takes, because what states might do is test the waters. They might throw something out. They try to, eliminate this, change this, redo this. And if nobody says anything, nobody says anything, even though it might be in direct violation of the state constitution, state law, or anything else. If nobody catches them, it just goes on, and that happens all the time. And there are groups that kind of watch out for this. One of them is the Fish and Wildlife Defense Fund. I'll put the website down below. This is a group of attorneys that looks at things like this and actually litigates at a federal level and does a lot of work in catching violations of the public trust doctrine or just blatant state federal law or whatever. And oftentimes it doesn't go to court, because as soon as somebody says, hey, that's not okay, that's against the law, it's against the Constitution, it's against whatever, they'll say, oh, okay, all right. And what they do is they go back and they try it a different way at another time. So you got to stay on it. But everybody's got to be on it and be paying attention. So I just want to make you aware that California's got an awesome Constitution. We need to take advantage of it.